When you take a moment to pause and label the emotion you're feeling, you're asking your prefrontal cortex to get involved, which pulls the activation out of the amygdala where your brain is processing threat or no threat. Instead of being overwhelmed by the physiological experience of the emotion, it creates psychological distance so you can experience it from a less threatening vantage point. Welcome to the Injured Athletes Club podcast, the show that helps athletes cope with sports injuries and bounce back stronger. I'm mental skills coach Carrie Jackson. We're sorry you're here, but we're glad you're with us.
And I'm journalist Cindy Kuzma. This week, it is just Coach Carrie and I, and we're going to do a deep dive into emotions. But before we get to that, we wanted to share one key resource with you.
The resource we wanted to share with you is our book, Rebound. It is a wonderful resource to support your emotional recovery along with your physical recovery when you are an injured athlete. So wherever you like to purchase your books, you can get a paperback, you can get a Kindle version, you can get an audio book where I am reading directly to you and walking the path with you. It's a really great gift for yourself, for your PT, for an injured athlete in your life that you know might need a little support. There's all kinds of stories in there of athletes going through their journeys, and as well as incredible mental training drills that you can implement immediately that can help you along the process. So grab your copy wherever you like to purchase your books.
Yes, please do that. And also, we wanted to give a big thank you to our exclusive sponsor for this season, Lever Movement. They're the creators of the Lever System, a portable lightweight device that attaches to a treadmill to reduce your body weight. You'll hear more about this later in the episode, but just a heads up, you can use code INJURED20 for 20% off any device at levermovement.com. All right, so let's get to it, Coach Carrie. This week, we are going to talk about the topic of emotions, what they are, how to get in touch with them, and why it all matters. And we're going to touch on a few different emotions that commonly come up during injury, but that we actually don't talk about as much. So first of all, Coach Carrie, let's kind of set the tone here. What are emotions exactly, and what purpose do they serve in our lives, especially as we're recovering from injury?
Yes. So to understand emotions, I think sometimes it can be helpful to define the difference between emotions and feelings, because those terms are often used interchangeably. And I even use them interchangeably, and you still will after you hear the difference in those two definitions, which is totally fine. But I think it's really interesting sometimes to understand like the actual nuanced difference. And emotions are acute, and typically what you feel in it's what you feel first in any given situation. So emotions include the physical sensations you feel. And at times, other people can witness your emotion as well. You might feel your heart racing and muscular tension, and others can see you are tense and possibly see your facial expression indicating the emotion you are experiencing. Emotions include that physical process, whereas feelings are the mental representation of what you are experiencing in your body. So feelings are cognitive. They're the interpretation of the emotion you're experiencing. Emotions, their role is to help us appraise a situation. And in a sense, they are telling you where to focus your attention and attempting to motivate you into taking action, based on the emotion that you're experiencing. It's an immediate response to a stimuli you've encountered, and every person will interpret that stimuli differently. That's why you have some people that love horror movies and some people that hate them. So for one person, they're thrilling, and for another person, they're terrifying. And so wait, Cindy, are you a horror movie fan?
Nope.
And I love them. See, so there you go. Like the evidence right there. I think they're amazing and I love them so much. Yeah. And I've had to convince my husband to watch them with poor thing. I like do baby steps with him. So I only do small ones, but that's just a perfect example of and same with roller coasters, right? Some people love them. Some people are like, that sounds like a horrible, horrible thing. And why would you throw yourself around like that? So the way I think of emotions, I like to think of emotions as messengers. The emotion is trying to tell you something, And your job is to figure out the message. But sometimes the cognitive appraisal you assign to the experience interferes with the intended message.
That is fascinating. And I'll admit that I didn't really know that those were different things. That is so helpful. I'm taking so many notes. Thanks, Coach Carrie. Already super valuable. So we always talk, speaking of roller coasters, we always talk about the roller coaster of emotions that comes after an injury. By the way, I do love roller coasters, although not as much anymore, but I do like that kind of scared I can connect with.
Different kind of scared. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you are working with an athlete, how do the athletes you work with describe this roller coaster of emotions post-injury, especially if they're newer to mental skills work or they're really struggling? I mean, I feel like for me, sometimes it feels like a roller coaster that I do not want to be on, one that's like going off the tracks. Like, I don't really know what's coming next, but I'm pretty terrified. But tell me how common that is, or like what people typically describe.
Yeah, the athletes I work with do very much gravitate towards the roller coaster analogy. And I think it's because for them, it reflects the nature of things feeling up one minute and down the next. And there are times when those ups and downs can be experienced quite rapidly, like a roller coaster. So things could be going well and you feel like you can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel and you're feeling encouraged and hopeful. And then you feel a twinge and immediately panic and feel afraid and confused and feel like all hope is lost. That's a huge swing that happens in a very short period of time. I also like the roller coaster analogy because at times I think it also feels like you are just strapped in and along for the ride and holding on for dear life and feeling like everything is completely out of your control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That makes sense. So why is it important? And I'm getting a sense from the way you've talked about emotions as messengers, but why is it important to identify which emotions we're feeling and to get specific about it? Can it kind of help with some of that sensation of overwhelm or feeling like you're just along for the ride?
Yes, it really can help with that. It turns out that accurately identifying the emotion you're experiencing helps to reduce the emotional distress that you feel. In psychology, it's called affect labeling. And the reason affect labeling is so effective at reducing emotional distress is because it helps to decrease the activity in your amygdala, which reduces the physiological arousal. And the reason it works is because when you take a moment to pause and label the emotion you're feeling, you're asking your prefrontal cortex to get involved, which pulls the activation out of the amygdala where your brain is processing threat or no threat. Instead of being overwhelmed by the physiological experience of the emotion, it creates psychological distance so you can experience it from a less threatening vantage point. And when you label it and accurately label the emotion, you understand what you're actually dealing with. So it reduces any discomfort you're feeling because of uncertainty or ambiguity. The way I think of it sometimes is like, it's as if the emotion is buried in the sand and you know there's something buried under there and you don't know what it is. And when you can't see what it is, it feels like, what if it's a big scary monster? But then you dig it up out of the sand and see, oh, okay, this is what we're dealing with. And unfortunately, our inclination often is to move away from the emotions, especially if they're distressing, instead of moving into them and getting the message.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that is a really powerful visual. And sometimes I've probably said this on a podcast before, but I've also described it as like a big ball of yuck. And I don't really know what's in it, but I just want to get away from it.
No.
Yeah. So how does an athlete go about uncovering that beast under the sand or untangling that ball of yuck or like whatever image works? I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have a drill and rebound that helps with this, right?
Yes, we do. We do have a drill and rebound. And the reason we have that drill is because it turns out we're not always great at accurately labeling our emotions. The reason for this is because our brains are wired for speed over accuracy. So it likes to clump information into categories to get access to the information as quickly as possible in a moment where it might need it. So that means sometimes we categorize emotions into broader categories of good and bad instead of actually labeling the specific emotion. So one of the drills we have in our book Rebound helps you to practice that. It's called the emotion decoder. Basically, it's a list of different emotions that you can access either in the book or in the PDF workbook we created that goes with Rebound. But you can also just Google a list of emotions and find a list to work with. As you look at the list, what you want to do is circle any of the emotions that resonate with you. You know, any emotions that you are either currently feeling or like have felt during your injury recovery. And then the next step might be to choose one of the emotions that you're currently feeling from the ones you circled. Set a timer for 10 minutes and just put pen to paper and write about the emotion. Like write anything and everything that comes. Don't censor yourself and just write about it. And sometimes that really helps us to process that specific emotion. Another way you can use it is to just recognize that you're feeling distressed and then grab the emotion decoder and look through the list so you can go, that's what I'm feeling, right? So dig it out from under the sand or pull it out of the cup of yuck, right? So, you're practicing the skill so that eventually you don't need the decoder. You can hit your own internal pause button and do it in the moment when you need to self-regulate.
Love that. So then let's talk about a few of the emotions that are on that list, the kind that a lot of times come up for injured athletes and that I think are pretty interesting. One of them is one of the first ones that I usually feel, and I think it's one of the first in the stages of grief too, although we know that that's not always completely linear, so it doesn't have to be first for everyone. But the emotion I want to talk about first is denial. So I'm curious about where this comes from, how it can affect us, and what we can do about it.
Yeah. So the first stage of the 5 stages of grief that was originally created by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is denial. And denial is a coping mechanism. Denial protects you from emotions you feel unable to handle in that moment. When you start to realize that you might actually be injured, it's common to say things to yourself like, this isn't happening, this can't be happening, please don't let this be happening, right? Those are sort of phrases of denial. And when there's part of you that's in shock or you're having a hard time processing what's happening, that can lead to feelings of disbelief. Usually we do naturally move through that phase with time. However, we don't necessarily experience the 5 stages in a linear process, which has been one of the arguments against using the 5 stages of grief as a model for injury. Denial can come up in many different ways. Well, I do want to say, I am a fan of using this model as long as, because, when I talk about it with my athletes, they very much resonate with it and start to recognize sometimes this is what needs to get pulled out of the sand is they don't realize that they're grieving. And so I find it to be very valuable and still, even though there are other models that we use now, I still come to this because I think it's important. And, denial can come up in many different ways for athletes. And although we sometimes will move naturally through that phase, if you stay stuck in denial that you're injured, then you'll end up potentially making your injury worse and prolonging your recovery. So if you're experiencing that, it's don't beat yourself up. That's a natural part of the process. But there might be a point where you want to sort of examine it and look at okay, is this was facilitative for a moment in time, but is it still now?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? With the stages of grief. Sometimes I feel like it's almost more applicable to injury than it is to losing someone. I don't know, but that's just a gut feeling that I have because I've really, it's a framework that's helped me in that context too. Can you run more mileage without getting hurt? Return to running sooner after an injury.
Keep your fitness even when you're facing a setback, or get to the start line healthy and faster? If you ask our friends at Lever Movement, you just might find the answer to all of these questions is a resounding yes. We are thrilled to welcome Lever Movement back as our sponsor for season 9 of the Injured Athletes Club podcast. And if all that sounds good, they have an offer that makes it easier than ever for you to try the Lever system for yourself. In case you haven't heard about it yet, the Lever system is a portable, lightweight device that attaches to a treadmill to reduce your body weight. This is very good news for all of us athletes because it means less impact on the joints, so we can come back from injury safely or even prevent getting hurt in the first place. And the best part is that it's portable. That means you can use it at home or even take it to the gym and set it up in less than 2 minutes.
Elite athletes like marathoner Sarah Hall and Jess Lehrmanth, an Olympic gold medalist in triathlon, have used Lever in their training and rehab routines. And we know, so have many of you in the Injured Athletes Club. If you'd like to check out the Lever system for yourself, use the discount code INJURED20 to get 20% off any device. And stay tuned here on the podcast and in the Facebook group for the Injured Athletes Club this season. We'll have more exciting updates from our partnership. We have some fun plans in the works with Lever we know you're going to want to check out. The next two emotions I want to talk about are like two that are linked, but not exactly the same. At least I don't think they are, although you're the expert and I want to hear your opinion on that. So those two are shame and guilt. So am I right that they are different? And let's talk a little bit about what they feel like and the messages that they can offer us.
Yeah, you're definitely right that they aren't exactly the same. And I think it's important in service of affect labeling to understand the difference between guilt and shame because they're often associated with one another. Guilt is usually associated with a specific act, while shame is associated with an overall feeling. It's sort of the difference between thinking I did something bad versus I am bad. So at times, something that would be associated with feeling guilty can turn into feeling shame. I did something bad, therefore I am bad. So that's why they get used interchangeably often, or they're very closely related. So both guilt and shame show up for my injured athletes. Sometimes athletes will feel guilty because they feel like they're letting their teammates down or letting their coach down. They might feel guilty because their body isn't healing quickly, feeling guilty that they have become a burden on their family because they need help, feeling guilty that part of them feels relief from the pressures of their sport. So there's a lot of different ways that can show up. And other times, athletes feel ashamed because they might feel shame in the sense that, they feel ashamed because they think that they let this happen. That somehow they're at fault for the injury and they feel like they should have been able to prevent getting injured or think that it's their fault they got injured. They might feel less worthy as a person because they're injured. They feel invisible because they're sidelined and feel like they don't matter, right? Those might then tend more towards shame. So whether you are guilt prone or shame prone can be a personality trait that you'll see in other areas of your life as well. And I will say when you're shame prone, you may have a tendency to turn guilt into shame very quickly. So this is where you really need to employ some self-compassion and move away from making declarations to asking questions. So when you're making declarations like, I'll never figure this out, I'm not healing fast enough, you're making judgments. That's all sort of stated in the language of judgment. And instead of making declarations or those judgments, you can ask, what's getting in the way right now? What kind of support would help in this moment? What is the smallest next step I can take? So when you move from making declarations to asking questions, you're moving from the language of judgment to the language of intention once you answer those questions.
That is an incredibly helpful way of thinking about it. I wanted to touch on one more emotion, and that emotion is actually a positive one, and that is hope. I feel like for me, at least, it's sometimes a thing I don't allow myself at first or I'm kind of resistant to. And I'd imagine it can be extra hard to channel for some people who are coping with something that's very long-term or chronic or life-altering, like some of the athletes we've interviewed on the show. So, Carrie, what is hope exactly, would you say? And what role can it play in your recovery if you let it?
Yeah, hope is a tricky one. And I love that you said it is a positive emotion, but it is not experienced as a positive emotion for a lot of people, right? And so that comes back to the feeling, which is the cognitive representation of that emotion. So hope feels, for a lot of my athletes, hope very much feels like a 4-letter word. And although we might identify hope as a positive or a facilitative emotion, it doesn't always feel that way. Remember, the feeling is the cognitive interpretation. It feels dangerous to have hope, or it feels like you're just setting yourself up for a harder fall. And it's very understandable that some athletes start to lose hope when they have experienced back-to-back injuries or are experiencing an injury that is difficult to diagnose and therefore difficult to treat. Like it's, struggling with hope makes sense to me in terms of part of your recovery. So it's, a lot of injured athletes struggle with this. I think it's important to know that you can be both realistic and optimistic. You can feel doubt and have faith at the same time. I think sometimes athletes feel like if they have hope, it means they're in denial of their situation. And that's not the case. It's okay to have hope for the possibility of a positive outcome. Having hope doesn't mean you're being dismissive of the realities of your situation or that you're lying to yourself. And I will say there is some injury-specific research that talks about the importance of this specific emotion, like talks about the importance of the role of hope for injured athletes. So athletes that allow themselves to feel hope have more perseverance in the face of setbacks. They have a higher pain tolerance, which I thought was very interesting. They have higher rates of rehab adherence, better coping strategies, and just in general report better overall well-being. So it is a facilitative emotion for injury recovery. So I don't want you to throw out the good with the, don't throw out the good while you're trying to get rid of the bad. Hope is a tool. And sometimes I think if you think about it like that, that might be a nice first step towards allowing yourself to feel it. Like if you think of it as, this is a facilitative emotion for injury recovery. So I'm going to experiment with using it as a tool. Right. Eventually, I hope you get to the point where you can really allow yourself to feel it in a different way. But if that's the step you need to get you there, fantastic. Your psychological readiness to return to sport will lag behind your physical readiness when there's a loss of hope. And if hope feels too big for you, sometimes what you can do is believe in other people's hope for you, right? So you can believe someone else might hold that emotion for you. Well, I'm having a hard time believing it, but I know Cindy believes that Cindy has hope that I'm going to get better. So I'm going to believe in that. I'm going to believe in Cindy's belief that she has hope for me. And so that's another kind of baby step you might take in that direction.
I'm glad to hear you say that because as you were talking, I was thinking, gosh, that is one of the things that I sometimes share with the athletes in our Facebook support group when they're going through a really hard time and they express the fact that they don't have any hope. Sometimes I tell them that all right, well, I'm going to hold that hope for you. And I hope that you can have it back someday. But in the meantime, I'm going to be here and believe that things are going to turn out for the better for you. So I'm glad to hear that is something that could be facilitative for people.
Nicely done.
It's almost like I've learned something from you.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. Well, we've talked about all of these emotions and we've talked about the roller coaster. So given how rapidly our emotions can change, I'm guessing that this emotional work isn't something that you kind of just do once and then you're golden. But are there specific times that it might be the most useful to check in with yourself about exactly what you're feeling?
Yes. Yeah. So unfortunately, right, mental training is just like physical training in that you can't just do one workout session and expect it to last you for the rest of the year or the rest of your life. Right. And I think sometimes we think that with our, the work we do on emotions. So consistency builds strength, right? Whether we're talking about mental training or physical training. One thing to know is that we typically see a spike in distress at certain points in the injury recovery process. So these might be times where you really put into place, what kind of support do I need? And what mental training do I need to do to support myself during these times? So we usually see them at the onset of the injury. We'll see spikes when you experience a setback, or sometimes even if you experience a plateau. Also, when you get back to higher intensity training. And then also when you are in a similar situation that is reflective of when you sustained the injury. So those in particular are ones where we typically see a spike and that you might really want to think about checking in with yourself. But really, it would be great to what would help even more than that. I think it's important to note those kind of checkpoints, but I think in order to really navigate those, the greater thing that you could do for yourself is to have a weekly check-in with yourself. And whether that's like, journaling, right? Like, here's how I'm feeling this week about my injury and my recovery and the support I'm getting, like, or you could just be sitting outside with your coffee or tea and do an internal weekly check-in to kind of like take a moment, get grounded and reflect on how am I feeling and what kind of support do I need?
Yeah, that sounds really helpful because I know, whether we're using the analogy of like the thing under the sand or the big ball of yuck, like they tend to like just get bigger if we do move away from them, right?
Yes, they do.
That checking in does seem like it would be really useful. Well, and what strikes me in talking about all this is that it's something that you can work on at any stage of your recovery, and that it's probably actually really useful in stages of your recovery when you can't do much physically. So like even when you can't maybe you're not even back to PT yet, you're not training yet, but you can work on this. You can work on improving your emotional intelligence. And when you think of it that way, it can be empowering. So I'm guessing, Coach Carrie, like when you work with athletes, that's maybe like a shift that you help them to make to thinking of it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're injured, it's very easy to focus on all of the things you can't do versus the things that you can do. And so I think that's one of the things that athletes do gravitate towards when they start learning some of the tools from Rebound and start working on their mental training, is the fact that this is something that is in their control. This is something that they can do. Not only is it empowering to recognize what are the things I can still work on that, will keep you connected to your athletic identity. Working on your emotional intelligence is something that is going to serve you in every area of your life. It is going to serve you whether you're getting back to your sport or needing to pivot and go in a different direction. Working on improving your emotional intelligence is something that is always available to you and always in your control.
Right. And I think then you just answered like my final and like the eternal Rebound injured athletes club question, which is like, do people find this process to be beneficial in other areas of their lives? And it sounds like, yes, they do.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. I was just working with a group of cyclists. They're going through a coaching program and we were working on these different tools and we were working on, oh man, I wish I could remember the specifics. I can't remember the specifics now, but we were working on one of the mental training skills and drills and he comes back and posts in our group, oh my gosh, like this just really hit. Oh, we were talking about burnout, and how it really hit for him, how burnout in other areas might have an impact on your sport and that he just had some significant aha moments when he was at work, right? So these, there are a lot of these skills that we're applying here in terms of injury and injury recovery also have an impact on you. If you're able to get back to your sport and they help you in performance in any area, whether it's your sport, work, in your relationship, as a parent, like we perform in a lot of different ways. We just don't always think about it like that. So these are life skills really. And my job and my area of expertise is applying them specifically to sport. But what I've come to realize over time is, oh my gosh, they just apply everywhere. And so sometimes a lot of people might seek out working with me because they recognize that and they're like, I think this could help me in this area. And do you think that, do you agree? And could we work together? And often it really can help in all kinds of areas.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Coach Carrie, thank you so much, as always, for sharing your expertise on this. I know there are a lot of athletes out there who are going to benefit from it. And I have learned so much. My page of notes is full. I'm on to the second page. So,
nice.
Thank you for that. Thanks to all of you out there for listening. And extra special thanks to our sponsor, Lever Movement, for making the show possible. Remember, you can use code INJURED20 for 20% off any device at levermovement.com. We're also incredibly grateful to Jeremy Nessel for editing this and every single episode of the show. Finally, of course, we appreciate you, our listeners and club members. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with another injured athlete who might too. We'd also love it if you would subscribe to the show and rate and review it on whatever podcast app you use. That also can help other injured athletes find us. Finally, between episodes, you can join our Facebook group, which is also called the Injured Athletes Club. There you can find support and advice from other people who are on this roller coaster with you. If we stick together, we will stay safer and help each other navigate the ups and downs along the way. So you can get links to that group, to all the things that we mentioned in the episode on injuredathletesclub.com. Thanks, and we'll see you there.